Thank you for sticking with this series and watching how to prepare a race body shell. In the last video, I announced that the shell that you've seen me preparing actually managed to win the 24th international race at the Slot Car Centre in the UK and is now the outright lap record holder. So here is the shell. So now the body shell is back on the car. The car has a set of rear tyres to represent where the wheels are going to be. I put it back on my block. I'm going to see where the whole thing sits now. So you can see now that I've actually trimmed these front wheel arches slightly, the front of the body shell is sitting absolutely perfectly around the front. So I will show you a picture of that, a close-up, so you can see how that sits on the block. You can see the side view, how the rear wheels sit nicely in the rear wheel arches, that side and that side. But these rear fins are a little bit long and will get caught on the track and possibly caught in the rear tyres, so I'm going to trim those off a little bit. I'm going to show you how I trim those. So I start by trimming them about halfway up the back tyre, so level with the axle. Maybe at a slight angle so they get slightly higher towards the rear. Same the other side. You can always use your eye line through and see how it matches both sides of the shell. So when I've done that, I then use my curved scissors just to trim out the back of the arch, tend to be in line with the back of the body shell. Like that, just so I'm curving that corner off slightly, so it's less likely to get caught. If it comes in like that, it's less likely to get caught on the rear wheel. Same the other side. Again, you can use your eye line through, see if you've got them about the same. I'm also going to trim off these back corners slightly, round those off as well. Like that. Same the other side. That's the rear corners rounded off. Okay. I'm also now going to trim where the front wheel arch is and where the chassis is. I'm just going to trim because I don't want the body shell to get caught up on the chassis like that. So I want to trim just enough away to stop it from getting caught on the chassis in the case of an accident, to allow the body shell to move nicely. So I'm going to trim it just clear of the chassis. There we go. You can see now it doesn't get caught up on the chassis and moves nicely. So I'm going to do the same on the other side. There we go, both sides trimmed. Just going to round that rear edge here where the wheel arch is. Same the other side. There we go. Next thing then is final smoothing of the edges of my body shell. So to do that, I'm going to remove it from the car again. Onto the rear wheel arches. So again, I'm going to use a fine sanding drum in my rotary tool. Again, at fairly low speed. I'm just going to run it around the inside of those rear arches. that just finishes them off nicely. They're not a bad finish. Sometimes I do just run round by hand, just round the inside, just to take off any burrs around the edge. But it doesn't matter if there are some little burrs there, because actually the Lexan is burnt slightly around the edge, so it shouldn't be likely to tear anyway, because it should still be a nice sort of smooth finish.
Sorry, I don't have an answer for that.
Well, again, I don't know quite why she talks, but she didn't know that one, so you do now. She's becoming quite the star of my videos. That's rear arches done. As I said before, Eurosport racing can be quite sort of rough and tough at times, so I tend to reinforce the body a little bit more in some other places. So one place that I reinforce the body is up at the corners of the rear wing. So again, I use this tape, probably cut it a little bit longer this time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And cut this down, again, quite thin. So again, probably in about thirds. So we're probably talking about 3 or 4 mil wide here. And then I can apply it to the inside top of the rear wing. Let's just use a pair of tweezers, might be easier. There we go. So the inside top of the rear wing, right down into that corner. And then you can see that runs just down the side above the rear wheel arch. Like that. Again, make sure it's stuck to the body shell, flatten down nicely. And do the same the other side. Like that. And then if I'm expecting pretty rough race, then I might very well run another bit up inside that rear wing. But this time, so it crosses over the other part. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Cut it into thirds or thin strips. And this time, I'll start by running it up the rear winglet into that corner. I don't know whether you can see in there. So I'm running it up that rear winglet into that corner. And what that does is it just reinforces that corner of the shell where it's pulled down deep into the wing part of the mould. The more you use certain shells, the more you'll get to know where they tend to rip and tear and where you need to reinforce them to prevent that from happening. So that's the rear corners reinforced. Now, sometimes I might run a little bit along the front of the body shell because again, with it fairly close to the guide, sometimes when you get hit, you have a front collision, it can tear the body shell at the front there because it puts a little dent in it and then tears where the dent is. Sometimes I reinforce around these corners at the front of the body shell, but I'd probably leave it like that for now because I know that it's all nice and smooth around there. But I might have to add some reinforcing if it looks like it's a bit dented or it's starting to tear at the front. So just to sum up, some tips and things that we've used whilst doing this. Sanding of the edges by hand. Make sure that all the edges are less likely to tear and rip. Reinforcing the body shell on the inside helps the Lexan and the reinforcing go right up into that wing and gives you more strength in the rear of the shell in case of an accident. Again, reinforcing it perhaps before painting helps the reinforcing stick to the body shell better than just sticking to the paint. Reinforcing round the back corners and radiusing the rear wing corners gives it a little bit more strength around the rear of the shell. Cutting up the wheel arches to give the shell slightly more flex, but then reinforcing around where you've cut so it doesn't tear all the way up. Masking off certain areas of the shell to make sure it's a little bit lighter. Double checking things, always making sure it's sitting nice and flat. Checking it on the chassis, checking it with rear wheels. Again, to make sure that nothing's going to get caught when the body shell's running. Make sure it's not going to drag on the track at the front. opening up the pinholes just to make sure the pins move freely into the holes. That gives the body a little bit more movement on the chassis and means that any vibrations don't get transferred from chassis to body or body to chassis. Thanks for watching again. Hopefully this was really useful for you. There's lots of tips in this one. So thanks for watching. Keep subscribing, keep watching, and there's more videos to come very soon. You can see this is actually after the race. It has to have a pilot inside it. It's got the scrutineering mark on it. It did have a couple of accidents during the race, but it survived very well. There are a few creases around here. A few little dents at the front. You can see where it's rubbed on the guide slightly, but that's fine. It wasn't actually stopping the chassis from moving properly underneath, or the guide from moving properly underneath. Reinforcing still all in place. Pinholes are still all in place. Not too bad there. Luckily it didn't have a rear end accident or didn't get caught on any marshals that went through the gears. I did see a couple of people have that problem, and as I say, one person had to sort of almost retire for that reason in the race. But overall, Shell survived very well and will live to fight another day and do another race.